Hey, 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 everybody. Woohoo! It's happy hour with Dr. Lisa, and I'm your host. I am Dr. Lisa. It is Wednesday, about a quarter past 7 o'clock Central Time, and I am just a little bit late. It's been one of those days. First, I couldn't get my lighting right. I still can't. I have new equipment, which is why some of my videos are going to look just a little bit off or just really close like this. And then when I was trying to get my lighting situated, I realized I left my microphone. So then I had to go find my microphone, which took an extra 10 minutes because, of course, my kids did something and I had to go, why did you guys do that? So I am here and I hope you guys had a good day. If you need to call me, you can do so. The number is 765-205-1959. You can email me at kidscanseeghosts@gmail.com, or you can reach me where? On social media. I am live right now on Instagram, on both of my Instagram pages. The first one is at Kids Can See Ghosts Can You. The other one is at Dr. Lisa 3. I'm also live on Facebook. I believe that is now a public setting. If not, I will fix that, but I think it is. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining me today. Some of you are live on Podbean, and I see you and appreciate the support. Thank you. I am going to be talking about Volume 67, Blog 59, titled The Devil Made Me Do It. And that was a blog that I wrote on my website, which is LISA, LIGGINS, Chambers, CHAMBERS, at gmail.com. We talked about a little bit about Blog 58 last week. It's titled Beloved. If you have not read it, please go back and read it. We had a live caller last week. If he is listening, I really appreciate you. Thank you so much. He shared some of his stories. This week we're going to talk about, or today, I'm sorry, a blog that I wrote back in May based upon some stories that I heard from kids about their auditory hallucinations. But before we do that, I am actually going to answer some relationship questions. I like relationship questions, so keep asking. I am not a marriage and family therapist. Actually, I'm not even a therapist. I do not do any therapy. I'm a tester. Everyone who knows me knows that I test children. Right now, I actually am starting up testing children on the spectrum or possibly on the spectrum. So I am back working with children and families, and I am thrilled. And I can't wait to meet some of these wonderful families. But I'm going to answer a question. I wrote it down because I don't try to memorize your questions because there are so many of them. So this first question is, actually there are, I think, 2 relationship questions and 2 about being a psychologist. So let's do it. The first question is, I'm smiling because some of you can probably relate to this, and I want to address it. This person wrote to me and said, my husband of over a decade stopped sleeping in the bed with me at night. And although we've been together many, many years, this recently started to happen, and he doesn't seem like he wants to be around me. What do I do? And let me cross that one out. So, I am not going to say that I have never been asked that question before, because I have. I have been asked, what do I do when someone seems to change, when they don't seem like they are interested or have a vested interest in our relationship? And in this case, um, this person's husband suddenly just stopped wanting to be in the bed with her at night. And I'm not talking about intimacy or sex. I'm just talking about, I don't want to sleep in the bed with you, and refuses. Um, to give you a little more insight, this person's husband sleeps on the sofa every night and does not want to sleep in the bed with her. And so when I thought about this question, I put myself in this situation. How would I feel? Right? Because I think that's one of the things that we can do as psychologists. We can be human and we can look at this from the perspective of what would I do? So I think one of the first things that people do not do is that they don't ask questions. That would be my first response. Well, did you ask your husband why he chooses to sleep elsewhere? That would be the first question, and exploring why that happened. You know, People do change over time. The longer you've been married, your bodies change, your hair changes. I mean, my hair is finally starting to change. If some of you can see in the video, it's not even gray, it's getting white. People gain weight. Your body starts to ache. You don't have that athleticism, if you will, that you used to when you started sleeping in the bed together. So, there are numerous reasons as to why this husband may not be in the bed with the wife anymore, after being married over a decade. The next thing I would ask is, if you don't get an answer that makes you happy or satisfies you, you can always make a choice to seek marital therapy or counseling. There are plenty of marriage and family therapists who are willing to intervene in these situations and help. you know and then you can also figure out, sometimes we ignore men, and we don't pay attention to the changes that they have, right? It seems like medicine is very concerned about what happens to women in our bodies, right? I'm not going to go off on a tangent here and get political, but we spend a lot of time in science dealing with the woman's body, right? But there are a lot of articles that will talk about men and what men go through and how their bodies react, after they turn a certain age, and different things that can help them. Because if you've been married a long time and your husband gets to be a certain age, you start to see differences in them as well, even bodily differences and chemical changes and things like that. So he could just be going through something, but we don't know until we ask. And when we don't know something, we fill it in with a lot of different hypotheses. So I don't want to do that. So if you ask your husband and he tells you why he stopped sleeping in the bed with you, then maybe we can explore a little bit further. So just, come back and ask me. All right, let's see. Oh, I told you guys I wrote down the questions and I couldn't read my own handwriting, but this one is really good. Really good. And I know some of you go through this on social media, because I've been through it too. Woo, this is good. It's making me hot. Let me take off my socks. This person said, Dr. Lisa, what do I do when old flames reach out to me on social media? Social media is a place to engage with your old friend flames, huh? Now, this is a married person. So I think a lot of us have been through that, especially when social media first started. I mean, I can recall, people finding me years ago, because I've been on Facebook for 16 years. So since 2006, Facebook's been around a long time now. And so I remember when Facebook, for example, started getting really popular. And there were people from my past, even women who I was friends with many years ago, getting in touch with me, saying hello. But here's the thing, those hidden messages, I've had those too, where people have sent me messages, that I deemed inappropriate for somebody married. So what I did, I'll tell you personally, what I did was I blocked those people. Period, point blank, I blocked them, right? If they are from your past, it's for a reason. Listen, leave them in the past. Do not bring those people forward. I don't care if you love the sloppy ground that they walked on when you were in college. You left them for a reason. That doesn't change just because you've gotten older. Okay? People are who they are. People reach out to, the core doesn't change. Behaviors can change. The core doesn't change. So, for example, if she cheated on you back then and she's reconnecting with you now and you're a whole different person, don't fall for that nonsense. Don't do that. Don't mess your current relationship up, or in this case, this person is married for someone from your past. Leave the past in the past and move on. I remember for a minute, probably back in between 2007 and 2009, people were sending me messages. I actually think the last message that I received was probably 2019 or 20. And it shocked me. It was somebody from high school. And I thought, I had to laugh, right? Because most of the time it's I'm so sorry that I screwed up. Who cares from high school, right? Right. For me, high school was over 30 years ago. For some of you, it was over 30 years ago. This person writing to me, I don't know if it was that long, but you leave old flames in the past, okay? You do not open up a wound that you do not want to deal with. Why? Because it causes problems. If you need to reach out to someone else emotionally, you need to go home and figure out what's wrong at home and talk to your spouse and fix it, or make some strong decisions about what you want to do before you open up another door. So listen, don't open up doors that have been closed, especially when you are involved with someone else or you are married. That's my take on old flames. Leave old flames alone, folks. Let me see if there's another relationship question real quick. I picked those two today. Okay. Here's a psychologist question. When I actually thought it was kind of like, duh. I'm just going to put it out there like that. This person said, do psychologists look at the human brain? If you're looking at me on social media, you see me looking like, duh. Come on, folks. Of course it has to do with the brain. I can tell you the major parts of the brain right now and the different lobes and where they're located and why we need to use them. Psychology is a study of the mind and the behavior. Come on, folks. Yes, we look at the human brain. We look at drugs and how they interact with the brain. We look at how the brain is connected to, various decisions that we make. Social psychologists study the different parts of, the social atmosphere that we're in and how they, interact with psychology, how people come together. I mean, physiological psychology, the study of the whole body. We learn all that stuff. So yes, yes. All right, the next question is, this is a question that I've answered before and I'm going to answer again because apparently it's not clear. So let's clear it up today. What is the difference between a psychotherapist, a psychologist, a clinical psychologist, and a psychiatrist? So I'm going to break down two different branches. Number one, psychiatrists are medical doctors. They specialize in writing medication for what? Mental health mental illness. A psychiatrist, again, goes to medical school. I didn't want to go to medical school, so I didn't apply to become a medical student, and I didn't go to medical school to become a psychiatrist. That's a psychiatrist. He or she is a medical doctor. By the way, there's a shortage of psychiatrists and psychologists, but psychiatrists in this country. So if you are interested in the field of psychology or mental illness and you have this passion to go to medical school, psychiatry is great. They get paid a whole lot of money too, especially because they're in demand. Psychologists are doctorate level individuals who study the brain, behaviors, and mental health and all the components of it, okay? So to be called a psychologist, you have had to have attended a school that is APA accredited, so American Psychological Association, APA. And you have to have a doctorate in psychology and all the credentials that go with that, okay? The different psychologists can be psychotherapists. It's at the doctorate level with far more training, because we have gone through doctorate programs and have been trained at that level. But we can do psychotherapy if we choose to. A psychotherapist can be a master's level therapist, meaning a master's degree with a license, okay, to conduct psychotherapy, which is therapy. Psychotherapy is one word. I see people misspelling that all the time with two different words. So they can be a psychotherapist can be a licensed social worker, be a licensed clinical therapist, at the master's level. And the master's, there is a clinical psych degree at the master's level. So they need to be licensed to conduct psychotherapy, okay? So again, psychiatrist, medical doctor, psychologist, doctor of psychology, okay? And then there are different branches to that. So for example, I'm clinical, I'm also school. One of my really good friends is a counseling psychologist, so things like that. But we go under the heading of doctors of psychology. And then you have a psychotherapist, which we all can do. But we make choices about that, and I don't choose to do it. Okay, I think those were 2 psychology questions, 2 relationship questions. So keep them coming. And no question is a bad question. I don't want you to feel bad about sending me the type of question that's pretty easy to me, like, do psychologists specialize in brains? But I am going to tell you it's a duh question because that truly was, because most people understand that in this field we deal directly with mental illness, which mental illness is a part of the chemistry in the brain. So don't forget that. All righty. Let's go into this blog. Whew. Speaking of mental illness, okay, one of the areas that you rarely hear me talking about with kids who can see ghosts is simply auditory hallucinations. And I will talk about how kids do talk to ghosts and have full-blown conversations with ghosts. But I don't necessarily talk too much about kids. I have one kid in mind, that's why I got quiet, who can see ghosts, put that aside, but then kids who actually have auditory hallucinations. And I thought about this because I actually met a child not too long ago who had auditory hallucinations. And later on, I also found out that this child could possibly, see ghosts. But I wasn't too sure because it was really difficult to deal with this child because of the fact that this kid had auditory hallucinations. Now, mental health comes into play the whole time. So it is not neglected, right? And I want you to remember that. So no matter what kind of kid I work with, they're coming to me because they have concerns in mental health, right? Right. There was this one child that I'm speaking of, however, who I figured out had auditory hallucinations and did not say anything initially for weeks about seeing ghosts. But the reason that I was suspicious, there are a lot of reasons that I was suspicious about this kid having auditory hallucinations, but and I'm trying to describe this kid without giving too much away because this one was more recent. Well, I'm going to tell you what this kid told me the voices sounded like first. Let me go that route. Because remember, I have to maintain confidentiality. And since this one is more recent, I want to make sure that I'm guarding this kid. Um, when I do hear from a kid like this one that has auditory hallucinations, the voices are usually male and they can seem scary to kids because they, like this girl described them as being, and this was a female, described it as being very commanding, okay, which is a common um, descriptor of these voices. And sometimes it would whisper and sometimes it was more commanding. But what was interesting is that over time, what I realized, and when I say time, I'm not talking about months. When I say time, I'm talking about maybe a week or two, that I started figuring out that this particular child had more than one voice. Mm-hmm. Yep, that can be heard. And so it was stressful. That's why I have my head down because I'm thinking about it, because there were so many voices that this kid could hear. Now, this kid would describe the voices to me as there are several of them. The first one is commanding and takes control of the other voices to protect this kid from the other voices. Now, that's interesting in and of itself. In my mind, I had a couple of hypotheses at that point as to what was going on mentally with this child. Any other psychologists who might be listening to this is starting to formulate some of those same hypotheses that I did. Is that there was a commanding voice, it was protecting this kid from the rest of the voices. Sometimes the voices could be more aggressive, some were passive, and so there were different kinds of voices. Some of the voices wanted this kid to be quiet. Some of the voices would fight each other in this kid's mind. Some of the voices would command this kid to do things to harm or self harm, make decisions that this kid typically wouldn't, things like that. And so, depending on the kind of voices that these kids hear, will dictate the kind of interventions that needed to be done. And so, in this case, there was a lot that needed to be done. Um, you know, this child's mental health was in crisis at this point because these voices would take over. And I could tell that this kid was hearing voices. So the way that I will describe it is that this kid would stop in between sentences and appear as if there was some type of a processing or interpretation going on with regard to what was being said. And so there were a couple of people who would say, no, 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 this kid doesn't hear voices, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, Yeah, no, this kid's hearing voices. So when I had finally asked about, hearing voices, this kid admitted to me that there were voices being heard. And so now, when you think about auditory hallucinations, you have to make sure, or had to, because of the different kinds of voices or things that were happening with this kid, that this was a kid who would not self harm with suicide, homicide, or anybody harming this kid. So there are a lot of things that had to be asked to ensure the safety, of this kid. And so that's where mental health comes into play. And the answer was always no, no, no. I'm not going to hurt myself. I'm not going to this. I'm not going to do that. So this was a child who really needed some type of therapeutic intervention, which, by the way, I was able to get that done. Um, Over time, as this child shared more things with me, um, it went from that to I see things sometimes, and sometimes I see shadows, and sometimes the voices will tell me not to look to protect me from the shadows, things like that. But I will share, and I think I shared this on the blog, that when these kids end up, all right, so the difference between this kid, for example, and a kid who can see ghosts. This kid only heard male voices, period. Kids that can see ghosts can hear every darn thing. They could probably hear you and me if we whisper. They hear everything. Male, female, they talk to male and female ghosts. They talk to dark angels and God's angels. That's a difference, right? With kids can see ghosts versus this kid. This kid only heard male voices. Comparing this kid to a child, so a nebulous child or a child who can see ghosts, the kids who can see ghosts were like she, he, they, them, all of the pronouns, and can hear all of them and can talk to them, right? When it's auditory hallucination. Now, wait, scratch that. Remember, kids who can see ghosts describe demons as dark angels. Kids who have auditory hallucinations would tell me that those voices were satanic, whereas kids who can see ghosts see all of that stuff, right? I hope you're following this, and if you're not, you write me to let me know. These are not exaggerations. These are what the kids tell me, and these are the differences. So it didn't matter. Let me give you some thought here. What religion these kids were, or even if they believed in religion, or their families, right, may have not believed in religion. None of that. These are things that these kids could do. So even with auditory hallucinations, when I did encounter these kids that just had these hallucinations, they had the same stories, that it was always male voices. As a matter of fact, in my entire career, I don't know of anyone, not even an adult, who had auditory hallucinations that were female. Now, if you have, you can write to me and prove me wrong. And when I have talked to children in particular, they've always said, no, it's dark, or it was Satan, or it was the dark angel talking to me in my ear, right? Now, don't ask me how they know it was a dark angel, because I don't. I don't know that. I'm just going off of what they told me, right? But kids who could see ghosts, who could hear and see, would not say that to me, and they didn't. They never said it was just a dark angel. Not once did they say that to me. So even when I probe, even when I ask more questions, like, how do you know that was a dark angel? Or what made you have the impression there was a dark angel? And they would just say, sometimes these kids would say, I've been hearing them all my life. Can you imagine that? Because I can't. I've been hearing this all my life. Or um, and with kids who can see ghosts, I've been seeing ghosts since I was little, right? So sometimes when I would deal with kids that had auditory hallucinations, I would actually be very stunned because, again, like kids who could see ghosts, they had the same stories over and over and over again. Next week, when we come back, I'm going to finish up this blog and talk about possessions under the heading of The Devil Made Me Do It. I can actually talk about this for quite a while and give a lot of examples. So we're going to save that for next week. In the meantime, I really appreciate you guys joining me, and you have a fantastic up and coming weekend. All right, you guys take care. Bye bye.